my friends. Welcome back to the School for School Counselors podcast. I'm Steph Johnson. This is episode 10. Can you believe it? We've made it to 10 whole episodes, and I know someday we're going to look back on this and just laugh and laugh about how we thought that was such a huge milestone. But I'm telling you, this is unlike any project we've ever undertaken, and we are just so honored and humbled to have received the feedback from everyone that we have. Counselor LB recently left us a review titled Real Life for School Counselors. And it said, "Thank you for speaking the truth about what we do on the daily. It's nice to know I'm not alone. Looking forward to more episodes." Counselor LB, I'm so glad that our podcast is resonating with you, and I appreciate your feedback so much. We're going to keep working hard to meet your expectations, I promise. Another one of our colleagues recently reviewed us and said, "When I heard that this awesome group was going to do podcasts, I couldn't wait to hear the topics to be discussed. They have so many real-life school counselor examples to show how this job really operates. Thank you for being so transparent." Thank you for that wonderful review. Y'all, that's why we're here. But the algorithms need you to keep providing feedback so we can be shown to school counselors that need us. So if you'll go leave a review right now, oh my gosh, how much we would appreciate you. It costs nothing but 30 seconds of your time, but it means the world to us and potentially to some other school counselors that might discover us because of your kind words. So thank you again so much for your support in this crazy, crazy endeavor. So for our big 10th episode, we're coming off some huge highs in School for School Counselors. We just had our free 4-night event called Best Year Ever. And oh my goodness, y'all, we broke our own Zoom room with that. We had so many folks coming in there to join us that we had to scramble and rearrange quickly. And it was great fun. We managed to get everybody in there that wanted to be there and had such a good time learning and interacting with each other for 4 whole evenings. We still have our replays of that event up if you'd like to catch them. We're offering them at a laughable price. I'm telling you right now that you're going to look at it and you're going to think it's ridiculous. And not because it's expensive, my friends. Go to schoolforschoolcounselors.com/BYE replays, all one word, and you'll be able to access those replays if you'd like to hear what all the Best Year Ever fuss was about, because I'm telling you, it was 4 nights of pure, solid magic. And those replays won't be available much longer. And did I mention we'll also give you a certificate of participation at the end. So jump in that if you have some time. We have lots of exciting things coming up too. You'll be hearing us talk about them as we go through our podcast episodes, but when this podcast airs, we will have just completed our Designing Data-Driven Advocacy workshop in our mastermind group, where we not only talked about data and the components of data-driven advocacy, but we helped each of our mastermind members design a customized approach to their campus data plan that feels manageable and sustainable. And in our main School for School Counselors group, we're getting ready for a 504 crash course. And if you get thrown into 504 lately, this one's going to be for you for sure. So we've got tons of stuff happening. You need to make sure you've joined us in our Facebook group, School for School Counselors, and check in on our website from time to time, schoolforschoolcounselors.com. So in honor of our 10th episode, I'm going to bring you some information that this shouldn't surprise you by now. It's going to be a little controversial. I think one of our biggest shortcomings in our field right now is a reluctance to question the status quo. We all just kind of go with the flow and assume that because everybody's doing things, they must be the right things to do. And I found that's not necessarily the case. This episode today is going to be no different. We're going to be talking about needs assessments and minute meetings. And if you've been a school counselor for a hot second, you know that the chatter at the beginning of the school year in August and September almost always centers around these 2 things: needs assessments and minute meetings. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on those today. And first of all, I'll tell you, I believe people jump into needs assessments way too early. Oh, my friends, I'm talking way too early. Typically, folks jump into these needs assessments right away when they haven't worked on a campus long enough to really understand and discern what their true role is going to be and where their responsibilities are going to lie. People get convinced that they need to jump into a needs assessment instantaneously, and then they end up feeling overwhelmed because they just can't get to all of the things that they expected to get to. You know, there's always that extra stuff that pops up, and then your administrators start saying, "Oh, we forgot to tell you, you do this too," or "We didn't tell you in your interview, but you're also responsible for that." Right? Some of you school counselors out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's a real thing that happens. And you end up feeling overwhelmed because you never dreamed that you would have all these extra roles and responsibilities, and maybe even hadn't anticipated the amount of needs that your students were going to be presenting to you. Needs assessments might not be the best idea right off the bat. And I get it. You want to know where your campus stands. You want to know your campus needs, and you want to be able to serve your students. I get it. But the ideal that you have about how your program is going to work isn't probably the whole story. And even veteran counselors can suddenly have rose-colored glasses as the start of the school year comes around. The good news is that there are other ways to find the information you need, and I'm going to tell you about that in a few minutes. So a needs assessment is simply an assessment that you would give to your students, perhaps your staff, perhaps parents or stakeholders. It just assesses the perception of your school counseling program. The problem is these perceptions aren't always super reliable. They can be skewed by others not understanding what our true role is, or not being supportive of the school counselor just overall. And sometimes they can give others the wrong impression about the scope of change that's really possible in just 1 year. And so I think it's a little bit dangerous to rely upon needs assessments for the design of what you're going to be doing in the upcoming school year. I feel really strange about it because I know that perception data is really not very reliable. Honestly, I don't know why we've elevated these needs assessments to a place of status in our world. It doesn't make sense to me. I think there are a lot more ways to get concrete information and data about what's needed at your school. But with that being said, I know a lot of you are going to jump into providing needs assessments anyways, right? So I want to give you some really good components of a good needs assessment if you choose to go in that direction. It's so important to be careful with this because if you make your questions too broad or provide the wrong response opportunities, it's going to complicate your life a lot. So my suggestions for some good needs assessments would be, number one, run them in a way where the data is easily accessible. The gold standard there is going to be a Google form because it's going to take all your responses and it's immediately going to compile the information for you. Believe it or not, we know personally some school counselors who, even within the last year or two, tried to run needs assessments by hand. And they did it because of a valiant reason. They did not want student information electronically recorded. And so they were going about these needs assessments, trying to tally them by hand so that they could try to make maximum impact with minimum invasion of confidentiality. But what happened was it turned into a total nightmare. Bless their hearts. They were working so hard on it, just pulling their hair out from the whole experience. And we said, hey, just scrap it, go back, do it again, and do it electronically that time. And when they did, oh my goodness, what a difference it made. So make sure that you're providing your needs assessment in an easily accessible format, not only for the students or parents or staff who'll be taking it, but for you to be able to easily access the data. Also be mindful of your questions. Make sure that you're not leading people into things. So it's like a parallel to your counseling skills, right? You know how we ask questions in counseling sessions, but we really work hard to make sure that we're not leading people with the questions that we ask? We want to be mindful of that same thing in our needs assessments so that we don't skew our information. And the third thing to think about is not to give too many choices. Again, we want to eliminate the overwhelm, both from the amount of responses that we get, but also to prevent fatigue from the person that's answering the assessment. You don't want to give too many answer choices. You don't want to overwhelm folks with too many questions or too many things to think about. Just keep it simple. Keep it concise. Use your campus data as a starting point for that needs assessment. You know, if you're not showing concerns in attendance, which hats off to you, especially these days, but if you're not showing concerns in the attendance area, don't ask a lot of questions about it, right? That problem has been solved. Go into some things that the data is suggesting are some issues of concern and start asking around those. See which of those are the most pressing or what's driving those concerns. That could be a very powerful needs assessment for sure. And the other kind of assessment that you can do, which is sort of an offshoot of a needs assessment, is a minute meeting. The minute meeting is designed to be a short session where you sit down with the student, ideally for 1 minute, but they usually end up running just a tad longer, and you're just getting some information, just some baseline information from students. You can build a needs assessment into this process a little bit, finding out what student needs are, and then compiling that information for your campus as a whole. Now, I actually prefer this method than just a straight Google form needs assessment. To me, there are two types of minute meetings. There's more of a get to know you minute meeting. You know, hey, how you doing? What's your name? Those are great for when you're new to a campus, letting kids see your face, letting them talk to you and learn your name and that you're there to help, those kinds of things, and asking, just a few basic questions. Or you can run a little more intense, sort of data-driven minute meeting where you're actually looking to compile statistics on your campus. You're looking to gather information about where students are in the process. For instance, maybe you're looking at high schoolers and measuring how close they are to making college decisions. Are they aware of where they stand credit-wise, grade-wise, those kinds of things? Minute meetings can be used for a lot of that. We actually had a conversation a few weeks ago with one of our mastermind members before I recorded this podcast, and we were talking about using minute meetings in high school and how effective they are. And one of the things that she and I both agreed on was that accessibility is huge. We both recommend going and being face-to-face with students where they are. Now, you'll see a lot of school counselors want to call kids down to their offices, kid by kid, for minute meetings. And in my opinion, you lose a lot of time there. You lose a lot of opportunity to knock it out a little bit faster. We want to be face-to-face with kids when we do this. Go where they are. Google Forms are great, but one downfall to an unsupervised Google form is that sometimes kids just start marking answers, right? You see this a lot with online testing too. When kids get tired, they just start clicking answers, and they're not necessarily trying to put any thought behind their responses. That's really going to skew your results. So that's why I like a minute meeting setup for a needs assessment much more. Get your Google form, have it in front of you, but you complete it as you're visiting with the student. Make it more of a conversation and less like a classroom assignment, and it will pay off so much more for you. But with all that said about what needs assessments and minute meetings are and how they can be set up, and by the way, we have templates in our mastermind if you need to see some, I have to tell you, I have huge concerns about both of these. And it's a concern that spurs from something that I thought a lot more school counselors would be aware of. But as we walked through our recent Best Year Ever series, I came to realize that this knowledge is not as common as I anticipated. And no shame there, I'm pretty sure grad programs aren't teaching this. There's a little something called the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. It's what you'll hear me refer to as PPRA. People used to refer to it as the Hatch Amendment, but not so much anymore. It says that any entity that's funded by the U.S. Department of Education, which is probably going to mean it's your school or your school district, you cannot provide a survey, analysis, or evaluation that asks questions in any of 8 protected areas unless you go through some front-loading beforehand. So let's break this down. The 8 protected areas of the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment are political affiliations or beliefs of the student or the student's parent, mental or psychological problems of the student or the student's family. Ooh, do you see how that one's going to play in a minute, right? Sex behavior or attitudes, illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating, or demeaning behavior, critical appraisals of other individuals with whom respondents have close family relationships. Notice it didn't say family. It said people with whom they have close family relationships. Legally recognized, privileged, or analogous relationships, such as those of lawyers, physicians, and ministers. Religious practices, affiliations, or beliefs of the student or student's parent. Or income, unless it's required by law to determine eligibility for some special financial assistance programs. So some of the categories that can trip school counselors up with regard to these needs assessments or minute meetings are asking questions that pertain to the mental or psychological problems of the student or the student's family, or soliciting critical appraisals of other individuals with whom the respondents have close family relationships. So these categories would include things like, do you often feel sad or depressed? Do you feel safe at home? Or offering an answer choice such as, my parents do not understand me. The core of PPRA is that you're not supposed to be asking questions about this information with students at all, unless you have provided parents an opportunity to view the survey questions beforehand and provide the option of opting out, which to me essentially negates the whole thing. Because if parents know what you're going to ask and they're not comfortable with the questions, what are they going to do? Well, some of them are going to try to coach their students, right? They're going to tell them what to say, or they're going to say, no, you can't give that to my student. You can't provide that assessment. And both of those options are within their rights. Secondly, you have to obtain written consent for the assessment. And here's something that a lot of people really feel bamboozled by. And I'm not a lawyer, so don't take this as legal advice, but it's definitely something that you want to look into. It is my understanding, and I have heard from many sources, that a blanket consent statement, similar to what your school district or campus probably provides, they have parents sign them at the beginning of the year through, beginning of your paperwork, student code of conduct, those kinds of things that says, I understand my child will have access to the school counselor as needed. They will be allowed to participate in all assessments, counseling activities, or group counseling activities as needed, or something like that. I don't know. But those kinds of blanket statements will not work and will not keep you compliant with PPRA. You have to be very specific in your consent for assessments. Something like, in the month of September, we are going to be providing a needs assessment for XYZ Middle School. The following are the questions we will be asking your students in an attempt to get to know them and what their needs are at our school. Please review these questions and sign below indicating whether or not your child has permission to participate. Also, folks, reverse consents do not work here. Those are probably not very legal anyway, but in this instance, you're definitely going to want to stay away from those. But if you send a consent home like that, If you sent, the statement of the time you're going to be giving the assessment, what questions it will contain, and whether or not parents want their students to participate, what kind of a response rate do you think you're going to get on that? It's probably not going to be super great, right? And nothing for nothing, families are not super wild about you diving into their personal affairs, and rightfully so. Y'all, that's not our place. That's something that school counselors often get in the weeds about because we want students to be successful. We want to support them in realizing their best selves. But it is not our job to go looking for issues outside of school. It's not our jobs to go searching for all the ways that we can help every student with their mental health. It would be great if we could do that. That would be phenomenal. But we don't have the time, we don't have the resources, and it's not ethical. It's not our role. So, in my opinion, parents have the right to be leery of these kinds of assessments. And to be honest, I don't think they provide you with a great deal of usable information anyway. Typically, if you have a student that's experiencing some kind of challenge or distress outside of the school day that's affecting their ability to learn or to participate in school activities, you're going to see other indicators of that. You may see grades falling, maybe discipline issues are rising, their demeanor is changing, or maybe they just come to you and flat out ask for help. We have to be really mindful of how far our reach is extending, and PPRA is designed to really keep a hold on that to make sure we don't go beyond the intended boundaries for school counselors. So anyway, don't take my word for it. Go and research PPRA on your own as well. Develop your own opinions and thoughts on it. I really just don't think we can be too careful with student information, particularly when we take confidentiality so seriously in our field. So if you haven't looked into doing needs assessments or minute meetings on your campus, I'll let you know, I might recommend them sometimes for the right time and the right place. They are not necessarily non-negotiables. You can always go and check your campus data, your attendance percentages, your discipline referrals, student grades, progress monitoring, all of those things to develop a pretty comprehensive picture of what's going on in your building. And then as you collect your use of time data, that's going to inform your practice even more than these arbitrary perception data points that you're going to be grabbing. But if you really feel a need to run needs assessments or minute meetings, or perhaps you're just running them as a get-to-know-you activity, or you're asking questions about non-protected information, you might need examples of what those look like. We have those available in our School for School Counselors Mastermind. It's one of the things that we discuss extensively at the beginning of the year as folks are getting their assessments out or they're preparing for minute meetings. We talk specifically about what those initiatives can look like on specific campuses or with specific grade clusters. It's really powerful to be able to talk those things through with people who have been there, done that. And they can give you your best advice, the things to avoid and watch out for, and all the pitfalls we don't realize we've stepped into until the last minute. We're also running a data cohort inside of our mastermind. And it's super fun because we bring that assessment data or that minute meeting data and really look through it with the cohort of people who love to geek out on the numbers just as much as you do. Y'all, it really is super fun. So anyway, that's available as well, but make sure, regardless of what you decide to do, make sure you've got a way to be able to collaborate and conspire with people with regard to your needs assessments and minute meetings. Do not try to do this as a Lone Ranger. It's so much more fulfilling and so much more helpful when you've got a team of people standing behind you, helping you implement and making sure you're staying within the guidelines. So here's today's action plan for your needs assessments or your minute meetings. Number 1, decide if you're ready for them or if you even want to do them. Is it the right time to administer them? Do you have a thorough understanding of your responsibilities on campus? Do you have the time or resources available to pick up some more initiatives? Do you have stakeholders that are willing to work with you? Those are all very important questions to answer before you jump into that. Second, determine your mode of assessment or how you're going to schedule it. Are you going to do a needs assessment or a minute meeting? Are you going to combine the two? What is that going to look like? Are you going to use a Google form? Are you going to use a form face-to-face? Who fills it out? When are you going to schedule it? All those things. And third, which is the funny one because it's usually the first step people jump to, but it needs to stay in third place. Structure or restructure your survey after you've made the other decisions. Remember that you don't have to invent these assessments all on your own. We have examples for you in our mastermind, and I know there are other school counselors willing to share as well. You probably have some colleagues in your district that you might be able to grab examples from, but structure those surveys to suit your needs once you've answered the other questions, and then you'll be well on your way to feeling competent and prepared. I want to leave you, however, with a caveat, and that is you don't necessarily have to administer either of these. And I know I've said that many times, but I just want to really bring that point home. If you feel overwhelmed, or if you're not sure what your year is going to hold, wait. If you don't feel like you understand PPRA well enough yet, wait. There's no mandated timeline for this stuff. Don't give in to FOMO, avoid the overwhelm, make absolutely sure you're ready, and then determine if you want to launch a needs assessment or a minute meeting. All right? It's okay. You don't have to be the rock star school counselor that does every single thing your first year. As a matter of fact, I would recommend against that. I think it's a really good recipe for burnout, and I don't think it's good for anybody. Y'all, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you'll take a minute to rate or review, it would mean the absolute world to us. Go check out the mastermind if you're looking for a supportive, consultative community for school counseling. Y'all, we got your back, and we have so much fun in there. So until next time, enjoy the journey. Enjoy the process. Don't push yourself too hard. Enjoy the beginning of the school year. Soak it in. Remember why you jumped into school counseling and enjoy your time with your students, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. I'll be back next week with another podcast episode, y'all. So don't forget to go leave that review. And until we talk again, be well.